Hi everybody. Wanted to give you a little hand in the meter identification portion of the exams. I know sometimes people get a little hung up on this, and I figured it was worth giving you a little extra information. It's never that huge of a portion on the exams, but for those of you who really want to nail it, this is for you. Um, okay, so I'm going to make this PDF available on the Moodle as well, but just go through some steps to make sure this is going to look like more than it is, but I tried to leave no stone unturned in terms of where the problems might actually lie. So, prerequisites. We have a little example here. You can see. I'm going to talk through this. You have to know, you really have to know how to identify the basic note values. If you don't know what a quarter note is or how many eighth notes go into a quarter note, stop right here, go review that, unpause the video, then keep watching and listening. Make sure you know what they look like. Make sure that you know that this is a simple thing, but the only ones that have an open note head are half notes and whole notes. Nothing else. Nothing else has an open note head. So, for example, none of these notes can be exchanged down here for notes that have a open note head, like that's an open circle as opposed to a closed circle. Okay. Um, in terms of writing counts, until you know what the meter itself is, don't write anything besides 1. And 1 goes at the beginning of the measure. It's kind of like the first house on a street has to be, the address, if we're being logical about it, the address is 1. If the house gets knocked down, you don't change the address of all the other houses on the street. So in other words, if there's a note or a rest at the beginning, right there, that's a note. Right here, that's 1. Right here, that's a rest. That's 1. Right here, that's a rest. That's 1. The next note, you won't know what count it's on until you know what the meter is. So now, before we get into the specifics of these right here, just remember that for meters, the top number can basically be any number. Um, the ones that we've done so far, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We haven't done 10 or 11, but we have done 12. So basically, 2 through 12 are the top numbers with the exception of 10 and 11. The bottom number can only correspond to a note value. So an eighth note is a note value, so an 8 can be on the bottom. A quarter note, or a 1/4, is a note value, so a 4 can be on the bottom. A half note, or a 2, 1/2, is a note value, so a 2 can be on the bottom. There is no such thing in music officially as a third note. So 3/8 is a possible time signature. 8/3 is not. It's a date on your calendar, and it's an actual fraction, but it's not a time signature. This is where we have to distinguish between just something that kind of looks like a fraction and something that is an actual time signature. You can't just slap two numbers together and hope that it is a time signature. Under no circumstances will the bottom number be odd. Now I'm going to go into technical land. You can have a 1 on the bottom. That would mean that the whole note is a group. We're not going to ever use that in the class. So all you need to remember is that don't ever see an odd number on the bottom. The only meters that you're ever going to see on an exam are the ones that we do in drumming class from the pages listed on the syllabus. Okay, now we're going to go down here and try and scroll up. What I would advise you doing now is pausing the video here and trying on your own to come up with answers for these. These A, B, and C here are all things that we've done before, all meters and types of rhythms that we've done before. It's not supposed to be the most obvious thing in the world, and it might not be the exact thing you've seen in a book, but for example, if you have something like this rhythm, C, but this first quarter rest here is replaced with a quarter note, I'm going to assume that you understand that those two, in terms of how much time they take, are interchangeable. Okay, so your starting process. You look at find the smallest note value in each measure, and we have a double bar in between here indicating that these are separate animals here. This is separate from this, is separate from this. And if you look at them visually, you can kind of tell they don't fit the same exact amount of stuff in them, especially here, A versus C. You can see that there's more 16th notes and other things left over in C than A. So you kind of just take a base assessment before you even go any further. Remember, I'm never trying to trick you here. It's not tricky. It might feel misleading sometimes, and I understand that, and a lot of times that has to do with the newness of it. But sometimes if you feel like you might be overthinking it, you might be. That's quite possible. Okay, here's the process. Find the smallest note value in the measure and count how many of those you can fit in the measure. All right, again, we go back up to the first step is you have to remember what the names of the notes and the relative values are. That is assumed. That's kind of like if we're in math class, I am assuming that you can do basic addition so that we can go on to something else. Or if we're in a chemistry class, I'm going to assume that you understand what the chemical symbols represent so that we can go on and talk about things. And if you're in ballet class, if you understand the basic terminology, then you can start to utilize it and understand it and start to put things together into concepts that make more sense to you on a bigger scale. So, smallest note value in this one. I'm not going to say it out loud yet because I'm going to give you a chance to guess. What's the smallest note value here? Say it out loud to force yourself to come up with a specific answer. It is a 16th note, right? These are 4 16th notes linked together. By the way, if you notice, the rhythm, a 16th note versus 8th note, we have 2 horizontal beams here. That's what makes them 16th notes. If you only have a single beam, those are 8th notes. Sometimes people get those two mixed up visually. So always make sure that if you want something to be considered a 16th note and counted that way and heard that way, you have to see the 2 horizontal beams right there. So 8th notes, 2 8th notes, 4 16th notes, another 8th note, 2 more 16ths. So 16th is the smallest note value. So let's say we have 1, 2, 3, 4 16ths, 5, 6. Right? I'm kind of going out of order just to go by note value for the time being. So we have 6 16th notes. Then we have left over, we have 1, 2, 3 8th notes, which translates to another 6 16th notes. So we have a total of 12 16th notes in this measure worth of space. We're not seeing 12, but we could fit 12 16th notes in this measure. Now, go in your mind and think about, well, what meters can fit 12 16th notes? This is just a basic little division. All right, well, if you look here, we kind of have 3 groupings. There's here, then there's a division, and then here, there's a division, and then there's here after that last division. So if we have 12 16th notes and we split them into 3, that means 4 16th notes per beat. In other words, this measure right here could be in 3/4, or it could be, well, the other meter we know has 12 16th notes in it, is 6/8. 6/8 we also know is divided into 2 groups of 3. It's like 6/8, if you remember from last semester, it kind of lies to you. It's not really 6 all the time. Sometimes it's 2, and it's 2 groups of 3. So, and I've been going through this here, 6/8 or 3/4. We have 3 groups shown here. Again, that's because the spacing in between. We can be pretty confident that this is 3/4. Right? We're not talking about this measure. We're not talking about this measure. We have to reevaluate. Anytime you see a double bar, you have to basically start over. Let's keep going here. Now, figuring out the counts. What I would suggest is, you see this down here, to determine meter, then to put your counts into place. So we know we have a total of 12 possible 16ths. So what I would do is you can even put a series of 12 dots where if you were to line them up, 1, and then the next one will be in between 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th one will be in between 11, 12. Okay? And if you had a full measure of 16ths in 3, 4, it would be counted 1E and 2E and 3E and right? That's a full measure here of the smallest rhythm possible. 1E and 2E and 3E and at the bottom of your screen. Okay? Now, what you can do is literally just highlight or circle or whatever you want to do to draw attention to each dot that you've drawn up here that coincides with the actual note head you see in the staff. Let's see if I can bring this screen size down a little bit. That's not letting me do it. See, even at home I have trouble with the computer. Okay, so we have 12 dots. You've drawn your 12 dots here. If you want to kind of write this out on your own and just kind of pause and restart the video as you try and go through this, this is a perfect example of something that will be on an exam this semester. Let's go down here. Reading through this, and again, I'm just making sure I don't skip anything. You'll be able to look through this as well when I put it on Moodle. Realize, by the way, if we're saying that it's in 3/4, you know that the last number in that measure is 3. It can't go beyond 3 because we've determined that there are only 3 beats per measure. That has nothing to do with the number of notes. Beats are just a measure of time. They're not a measure of activity, right? So if you can have a lot of stuff going on, 1E and 2E and 3E and or you can have 1E and 2E and 3E and 2 notes versus a bunch more than 2 notes. It's the same meter, same tempo, just different activity level, different rhythm. Right? And again, if I'm speaking too slowly, you might even be, you want to, or I'm sorry, if I'm speaking too quickly, there might even be ways for you to replay this video at a slower speed, or of course you can just rewatch it in general. So we have 1 and, hopefully you're comfortable enough remembering that that's 1 and, it's a pair of 8th notes, right? It would be 1E and then we have 2E and then we have 3E and So if you put them together, it's 1E and 2E and 3E and Or if I remove the dead 16th note counts, it turns into 1 and 2E and 3 and So hopefully you're with me so far. Let's go on to the next one. And we'll go through this process. I didn't go through this process on this page with anything beyond example A. Just some reminders for you down here. I'll probably touch on those in a little bit. So example B. And again, hopefully you've paused the video so that you've come up with your own answers, and then all I'm doing is talking through my process, and maybe some of your process is slightly different than mine, but as long as you get the right answer and you feel confident you can reproduce it, totally fine with me. Now, first step, find the smallest note value. Okay, well in this case, do you see any 16th notes? Right? This little guy here, that's just what an 8th note looks like by itself. It has this little flag as opposed to a horizontal beam. That's what they look like when they're by themselves. You've seen that before. So our smallest note value here, in this case for letter B, is an 8th note. So now let's go through and we would take our 8th notes and we'd create a series of dots on top here. So we have the first thing we see is a quarter rest. We're going to put 2 dots there. That represents the 2 of the smallest rhythm. Then we have a quarter note, another 2 dots, dot, dot. And then at the end of the measure, we have 3 eighth notes, dot, dot, dot. So if you go back and you count 2 plus another 2 plus 3 is, and we did it in class this week, 7/8. This measure is 7/8. It can't be anything over 4 because, as I may have mentioned in class today, we can't, especially for our purposes, we're not going to have a 3.5 on the top note. If you have an odd number of eighth notes, I'll say this slowly because it's important. If you have an odd number of eighth notes, you can't have a 4 in the bottom of the time signature because we don't have a complete number of quarter notes. We only have a complete number of eighth notes. So, whereas letter A, we could, before we look at how the measure is cut up into 3 pieces, we could go either way. We could go 3/4 or 6/8. But then you look at how it's cut up and you say, okay, I'm going to choose the one that shows 3 beats. The beats are shown here by basically their own physical space. They're disconnected from the rest of the measure. Here, we don't have 16th notes to worry about. We have an odd number of eighth notes. And so this one has to be 7/8. Now, if I asked you what the groupings are, well, let's see what you could figure out. We see a grouping of 2 at the end there. Sometimes it helps to go out of order rather than go straight across. And the question mark is kind of like what to do here. All right, so we either are going to make it 2/3 or 3/2. And in this case, it has to be 2/3, right? 2 because there's no way to turn this in conjunction with this quarter note into a 3 of anything. That would actually be 4 eighth notes right there. So if you consider this a 2, it would be 2, 2, 1, 2, which isn't really what we were doing. If that confuses you, just remember your only options if you're looking at groupings and how to count it would be 2s or 3s. 1 is not a group, it's just a pulse, and 4 is, we're not using that right now. So now let's put the counts to this. So we put our dots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, there's nothing after this, so there's no counts that go after this. Unless you see a rest after this, don't try and make it into something it's not. Very commonly, people are a little doubtful. They'll go, 7 doesn't sound right. It doesn't sit right with me. I'm not comfortable using that. Well, you're going to be more and more comfortable as you get more experience musically and rhythmically. So we have rest for first 2 counts, 1, 2. This count is on 3, and it holds through to 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I were to count it, all the eighth notes, and clap it, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I repeated it a couple times so you could hear how it cycles on itself, this is how it would sound. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like that. Okay, lastly, and I'm going to go through this one the quickest because we've already done a meter that kind of looks like this one over here. So, letter C. What's their smallest note? Say it with me, 16th note, right? This is a quarter rest. We can fit 4 16th notes there. These are 2 more eighth notes. That's the equivalent of another 4 16th notes, right? We have 2 16ths per eighth. Another quarter note. That's yet another 4 16ths. Then we actually have 4 16ths right here, and then 2 16ths and an eighth. So that's so we have 4 plus 4 here, plus another 4 plus 4. That's 16. Already, because we have leftovers, we know this can't be 4/4 because it has more than 16 16th notes. And then our last little chunk here, we have 2 16ths. So that's 16 plus 2 is 18, plus an eighth note, which is equal to how many 16ths? 2. So 20 16th notes, right? What meter have we learned that can fit 20 16th notes in it? I think from one of your earlier rhythm quizzes we had a rhythm that was with very long measures in 5/4. Hopefully this struck you as something being longer than 4, and one of the only ones that we've done longer than 4 that has 16ths is 5/4. So if you look at this, let's verify. So, and I'm gonna go from the end of the measure rather than the beginning. We can go both ways, but here's a group. Again, there's separation there. Another group, that's the second group. Here's a quarter note sitting all by itself. That's the third group. Pair of eighth notes, the fourth group. Quarter rest, fifth group. From the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the counts. You're going to draw your 20 dots over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Right? And I was trying to use emphasis in my voice to show you where the kind of dead 16ths are, the ones that aren't being clapped on. Now I'll count and clap this one and see if you can do it with me. 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, and 3, 4E and 5E and. 1, 2, and 3, 4E and 5E and. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So now let's go to the next page, and I have some of the numbers written here so that you can see all in one place where everything is written so that you can kind of compare yourself to what's going on. What I did here is I wrote out in 6/8 the same rhythm that you see in 3/4. And this is a crucial one because we're starting to do compound meters with 16ths. Compound meter meaning 6/8, 9/8, 12/8, as well as some of the odd meters, right? 7/8. And remember that the eighth note now receives the beat because the 8 is in the bottom. So here we have 1 and 2E and 3 and up. If we count it in 6/8, it would be 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, 6 and. Notice the emphasis is on 1 and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, 6 and. 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, 6 and. 1 and 2E and 3 and 1 and 2E and 3. Switch back. 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, 6 and. 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, 6 and. So just so you have a comparison. Now, sometimes it's a common question, like, why have both? Well, if you listen to them and you dance to them, you'll have no question as to why you have both, because they have a different spacing of the beat. They have a different quality of a cycling on itself from each other. 3 beats versus 2 beats, and then what you're doing in the middle of the beats. Those two things are different in those cases. Okay, some basic observations and tips. Just this is, I hate doing this, but it's kind of test strategy, just so you can not get hung up on things that might otherwise be confusing. And to that end, I don't want you to get hung up. I don't want you to get frozen. I want you to feel comfortable and just use common sense and a little bit of trial and error. Always remember, use a pencil on this. That will always be a good idea. So, some basics. If you're asked to write 2 measures, make sure you actually write 2 measures to receive credit. I assign per measure 1 point if you got the counts right, and 1 point if you got the actual written rhythm right. If I started giving it more points, it would skew the exam way too heavily in favor of the rhythm, and I think we all agree that that's not really necessary, not enjoyable. It's not appropriate. So I'm not going to do that, but I do have to either go thumbs up or thumbs down. So if you are giving an answer, make sure, like for example, these are 3 measures. I would need to see 3 different measures of rhythm. Sometimes I'll ask you, like for example, this 6/8. Now this is a long measure, but there's only 1 bar line, so I'm only asking for 1 measure. But if we go over, I'm going to go into my other program here. This is the program I use to create this stuff. And I'm going to create, now all of a sudden, if this would be a 2-bar exercise. And so here are my options for different notes. So if I filled this up with 16ths, for example, and let's get rid of that, scroll over. Right, so now we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, 6, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and. That's going to be 2 complete measures. And again, if you see 3, make sure you see you actually do 3. But in general, I'm not going to give you too many. But just, if you understand it, I could give you 100 and it wouldn't matter. You would just, as long as you had enough time, you could do it. I'm not going to give you 100. Don't worry about that. Okay, back to the PDF. I guess, yeah, I'm paraphrasing here. The bar lines are not suggestions. Make sure that you use them as hard boundaries for what you're writing. Practice writing in counts above your whaley rhythm exercises that we do in drumming class. Just getting some rep in. It might seem like, okay, why am I doing this? Why can't I just get it explained so I can have a shortcut to this? Well, just like anything, I mean, you guys know better than most people. You have to do some reps on stuff. And it might seem a little old-fashioned, but just writing out the counts a few times, you'll get in the habit of putting the counts in the right spot. And you'll understand, oh, wait a second, I remember never writing beat 1 anywhere other than the beginning of the measure. Those things will come back to you if you spend time doing them. Remember, you're only going to be asked to identify meters and material covered in the whaley pages listed on the syllabus. Getting familiar with that material will help you, if I ask you to compose a rhythm on the exam. Any meter with an 8 on the bottom and a multiple of 3 on the top, so that would be 3, 6, 9, or 12, needs to be broken up evenly into groups of 3 connected eighth notes, or their equivalent in 16ths. So if I go back here, that's what that's referring to. Putting the groupings there, putting the groupings there. You can technically write out everything separately, but if you want to show me that you really get it, which will help me give you the benefit of the doubt in other places where you're writing rhythms and I'm not sure what you're trying to do, then you show me the groupings, and that'll help you. That'll give you some credit elsewhere on your exam. Any meter with an 8 on the bottom, like 7, 8, 5, 8, the odd meters. Odd meaning not the opposite of even, but odd meaning unusual. Irregular. They'll be written in groups of 2 and 3 eighth notes. So here is a group of 2 eighth notes. Here is, like I said before, this is a group of 3. Right? It's harder to see because this isn't connected, but if it was connected, it wouldn't be a quarter note. So we have to use a little bit more of your imagination to see the 3 aspect in this measure. I understand it's not as easy and obvious. And that's actually addressed right here. A quarter note is often a group of 2 by itself, but can't be connected to other notes with a horizontal line without changing its note value. Suggestion if you want to try composing a rhythm, and this is going to be coming in handy later on for your group projects as well, when you're actually going to be composing so that you play them rather than just write them down. That's part of what we're working towards in the course. When composing a rhythm, try starting with a simple, correct rhythm, one that you're confident with, and then vary it. Plug in substitutions. I'm going to turn that note into a rest. I'm going to turn those 2 eighth notes into 2 sixteenths and an eighth note, until you're satisfied that you've met the shopping list that I've given you on the exams. All right. Here's some information. You can read that on your own. That pertains to the above examples. So here's some stuff that you can try on your own just to see what you can do. See if you can answer these. And I'm going to leave this to you guys to kind of crowdsource the answers to these. I'm not going to put them out there. But hopefully this has been helpful. Watch it as many times as you can. If you want to leave a comment in the video about maybe a particular timestamp that was particularly helpful to you that other people might therefore want to go towards as answering a specific question, go ahead and do that. Obviously, be nice. But I'm trying to help you guys out a little bit because I realize it's a lot of stuff. You got a lot of stuff going on, and this I hope will go a long way in making sure that you just have a little extra support in understanding the material so that we can get to the next thing, the things that matter, the material that's actually important. Sometimes you have to wade through areas that aren't as clearly beneficial, and this for some of you might be that. For some others of you, you might understand that being able to envision and picture rhythm will help you organize it in your mind, and if it's in your mind, it can be in your body as well. So that's just my idea. Feel free to bounce that idea around in your brain for a while, see what you make of it. Good luck, and I will see you in class. Bye-bye.